Hello, welcome back to Gab and Gro Conversations in Pediatric Therapy. This is episode 13, I believe, and I'm Allegra Bereznowitz, speech language pathologist.
I'm Amanda Pellegrino, occupational therapist. How are you? Follow up immediately with, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How's good?
Unemployment.
Yes. So for updates, life updates, I am officially moved on from my previous hospital job. Well, that makes it sound really dramatic. I retired. No, I'm just kidding. I'm moving. Naturally, I have to find a new job. So I'm taking a little bit of a break. Gonna feel it out, see what I want to do. I'm gonna pursue my passions, but definitely staying with pediatrics. That's for sure.
What are you thinking? Like, are you thinking private practice, hospitals, whoever will take you?
You know, I gotta see. I will be honest, in the move situation, I haven't done research and I have to get a new license for New York.
Yeah.
So kind of just using that time to get settled in my new house, and then I'll start applying for my license and take a little gander around, but maybe Allegra will just hire me in the meantime.
How does New York licensing work? Do you know does it take forever? Some states notorious for just taking forever, so that's why
I've heard New York does take a while. I think I have to send my transcript. I think I have to give a lot of information. So
yeah,
we're just putting that on pause until I actually get to New York.
Like, I need to move first. I need to figure it out,
and then we'll figure it out. But I'm going to keep my Massachusetts license because it would be silly to just let it.
Yeah. And you can always do like telehealth. You have to be, at least for speech, you have to be licensed in the state that you are in, as well as the state you're providing telehealth service. Fun fact.
That makes sense.
I think it's their way of just getting more money. But
yeah, that too. Well, I mean, you have lots of life updates happening too.
Not really. The baby's still inside, so.
Inside, but baby coming soon.
No big life updates there.
How many pounds are they? We don't know the gender.
At my 36-week appointment, which was 2 weeks ago now, they estimated 6 pounds. But I've also read like that ultrasound measurements can be completely off, like a pound off, give or take. So I hope it's not 7 pounds. You know, where I'm tracking at like 6.5 right now.
I'm going to be in Aussie. Come over and we'll do newborn shots.
My brother-in-law, Billy and Emma, they got us newborn photo shoot.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh, they took my job. But that's so rude. They didn't even consult with me.
You can do pregnancy shots. You can come over and we can do a maternity shoot. I actually feel so uncomfortable doing that. Anyways,
then we don't have to. Well, Miss Allegra, what are we going to gab about today? You're supposed to ask me that.
Yeah. I thought we were gabbing about one of an OT combo.
We are talking about an OT combo. Oh my gosh. You know what? I didn't eat breakfast today. So if anything I say doesn't make sense, it's because I totally should have eaten before I started this.
Well, me too, actually. I had a session before this. So I'm just...
Okay. So the brain is not firing on all cylinders. If we pass out, it's a problem.
But it might be better than 7 p.m. So we're recording this in the morning. God. So it's a different us.
Can you see some of those videos? I'm like, is she okay? I just wake up. But it was after a long day of work for both of us. So hopefully this is a little different. Also, if my dog is crying, it's because he's being a pain. Okay, so
he's not used to having mom home during the day.
Exactly. So he's begging for attention. But okay, what I wanted to talk about, we talked about occupational therapy. What is it last time? I wanted to segue back to our sensory series. We talked about proprioception. And talk about the vestibular system. Do you feel like families are like relatively aware of the vestibular system when you meet them? Like, do families ever bring that up to you? You're in speech therapy, but also like, is it something that comes up in your practice ever? Just out of curiosity.
I think it does, but not in so many words. Like, they'll describe the concerns that they have, and then like, I know that it's a vestibular system issue. But I would say it's probably more common than proprioception.
Really? That's kind of interesting.
In my mind.
no, that's families are more aware of that because I feel the opposite. I feel like
maybe it's also just the terminology though.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a lot more. There might be a lot more kids on your caseload that present with proprioceptive dysfunction, but they don't necessarily know that that's the term, if that makes sense. Versus vestibular, I feel like, especially like in the adult population, I know we're not talking about that, but I feel like vestibular system dysfunctions come up more so. Like just like cue people into it a little bit more.
Yeah, and to also say like what we cover on this podcast and today is like a drop in the bucket of how vast some of these systems really are and how complex they really can get. But to kind of like summarize it in very brief terms, I think we talked about it a little bit in the massive, like all-encompassing episode. But your vestibular system is what gives you information on your speed, direction, movement. And it's really closely tied to your perception of your head position because your vestibular system is located in your inner ear. So it gives you a sense of, okay, is my head upright? Is it down? Am I rolling? Am I side lying? Am I moving backwards in space, forwards in space? And then, how fast and in what way? So a lot of things that this can also influence is your spatial orientation. It can influence your spatial memory. It can influence your alertness, like how alert am I and how able am I to access information from my environment. It can also then influence your eye movements and your control of how you can visually scan an environment, how you are able to track. Say maybe you are looking up and down at the chalkboard and then your paper. How much smooth control do you have over that? It influences your balance, your postural control, your rhythm, and your timing, and overall your coordination. So, I mean, that's a lot of stuff that this system did. When I named any of that, was any of that like, wait, what? Or did all of that kind of check out?
I think it's more just like I don't think of it as like affecting like whole body effect. Sorry, my brain today. I'm going to blame pregnancy brain.
No, that's okay. You have that excuse, so honestly.
But what I'm saying is like when I think of more balance.
Yeah. No, it's
obviously like when you think of balance too, you're like, oh, well, that affects your whole body. But like that's kind of like my go-to when I think of vestibular.
Yeah. So spatial orientation and spatial memory, it's kind of cool. Your vestibular system can connect to the part of your brain called your hippocampus, and that's what is connected to memory. And from a spatial standpoint, like your vestibular system can tell you almost like how far away am I from that? How do I have to orient my body to be able to effectively move through an environment? Like how far and how close am I? So a lot of like really, I mean, like, not to use the word basic, but like what we perceive maybe as like basic navigation of your environments, like walking maybe up the curve of a sidewalk from like the street to the curb. That could be a really taxing demand for some kids who have vestibular differences. And also to think about it, like to frame the way we're thinking about it as like, this is a child who is otherwise a healthy child, like didn't have any like neurological impact to their like a cerebral palsy patient, or like there's certain, conditions that can damage the vestibular system. We're thinking about this more of like my perception of this is different because of my, just from a sensory processing developmental standpoint too, to kind of like differentiate our lens here as well.
Yeah. And like the fact that it affecting the hippocampus is new to me, and like affecting memory, because you'd think like, oh, okay, well, it's affecting, I'm going to go back to balance, but like that's why they can't walk up a curb, but like not like the fact that it's also, okay, like muscle memory, and that piece, does that play a role in?
I mean, absolutely. So your vestibular system can also affect your muscle tone and how we're like experiencing gravity, and we know the amount of tension to use on our muscles to then step up on said curb. But also it's going to definitely like, you can train. And then so say you have a vestibular difference of like, okay, I'm going to overshoot or undershoot or not be able to perceive how big of a step I need to take, you could then strengthen that proprioceptive system, like you said, of muscle memory of like, okay, I can step up here. What other accommodations can I make? Yeah, absolutely. And I think graded exposure can sometimes be really useful as well. And in sensory integration, the goal is to target your vestibular system versus like a sensory motor approach of we're going to practice this step and practice this step. Sensory integration, you're targeting movements within your vestibular system and your inner ear to have a better and more efficient response from that sensory system. So they're targeting the central nervous system. And there are two very different approaches. There are approaches for different kids, but also to kind of make that example a little clearer about like, oh, my therapist might be using this approach versus a different one.
Okay. Awesome. So what would a parent's main concerns be? I guess this is broadly speaking, but when they have a vestibular system concern for their child.
Very good question. Very broad. Okay. So great question, Allegra. So we often see things where parents will come in concerned of like, my child is craving or avoiding high intensity movements. Maybe they're really, really fearful of climbing up on the playground. Maybe they are aggressively seeking out this movement. They're rocking in their chair. They are running into things. They're not aware of their spatial position in different environments. Sometimes they're clumsy or they're falling, balance challenges, safety risks, like I said, like jumping from really high places, just appearing in general lost in space. And so, you know, some of those examples do tend to be like those seekers of like, they're just on the go.
Big overlap with proprioception.
Yeah, it could be. I think there's definitely subtle differentiations, but I mean, our body is a whole system. It's certainly difficult to tease out of like, unless you do very formal sensory vestibular testing, which does exist. You know, it is difficult, and there's a more intensive process to that versus like stand on one leg. Yes, that gives you information about how the vestibular system is working, but as you pointed out, that also involves your musculoskeletal system. It involves your core strength, other things like that as well. So on the other side of that too, right? Like I feel like we tend to talk about seekers a lot, but there's also a phrase that's called gravitational insecurity, and that can be fear around movement. For example, like having your feet off of the ground. It's kind of, I guess, to pair it like a fear of heights a little bit. So some kids might be okay on a swing as long as, and they can spin, but it has to be self-directed and they have to have their feet on the ground and then they can move however they want. So it's not a sensitivity to movement. It's a sensitivity to lack of control of movement. And that can be also like tipping their head back in the shower. So fearful around changes of body position. So maybe like putting a baby down to change the diaper. That backwards in space movement is really, really, really scary. So that can be another sort of lens of how we view the system from the opposite lens of I'm too sensitive.
So what would some things that parents can do? Like I loved the example of, okay, putting a baby down to sleep or something. Is that like a reflex? Is it lack of reflex integration? Is it just a vestibular, I don't want to say issue. What's like a better?
I mean, you could say difference, vestibular differences.
So what are there strategies that parents can do so that the child feels safe in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the age, but let's stick with our putting a baby down backwards, right? Like, I think you would want to work on with your therapist, you know, aside, like maybe some graded exposure to those different types of movements in a safe way. But I mean, oftentimes it's like giving them compressive input, helping them feel more secure and contained versus like free falling through space.
Your parent's hand on the back of their head, or like slowly lowering them, or
going slowly for sure, giving them control where control can be given. You know, obviously this depends on the age, but like maybe moving into side lying and then moving into that upright position.
Can you explain graded? We were just saying work with your therapist.
So if they were taking a more like sensory integrative approach, like you would want to give them inputs that help their body feel more grounded in their body. That was a weird way to phrase it. But there's two parts to your vestibular system. There is a part of your vestibular system that is basically, it's called your like, I am here, and it's called your otoliths. And what that does is that's where you want to use very strong, powerful, rhythmic, linear movement. So that's the part of your vestibular system that's going to get activated when you're on a swing, when you're jumping on a trampoline. But the rhythmic part of that is really important. And then there's the other part of your vestibular system, which is your semicircular canals. And that's where you're going to, when you're spinning in different directions, when you are rolling, like a log roll. So all those different parts work together. But for a kid who's really fearful of movement, we're not going to whip them around in a circle, right? We're going to want them to move in a way that they are simultaneously getting information to their muscles and their joints and to their vestibular system so that they can combine it in a way that gives them more information of where their body is in space, but also helps them feel safe with that movement in a way that they can control it. So with that being said, like adults can be like, for example, like as you get older, some adults get more car sick, or like some adults get more dizzy easily. And part of that is because we're not moving in all the directions we were when we were a kid, right? Like when's the last time you did a somersault? Like a long time. Like when's the last?
I've been standing on my head though.
You haven't?
Well, kind of. There's like,
you do yoga?
No, to get the baby into position, there's this forward leaning inversion exercise.
You go yoga. Like if you do yoga, obviously you're getting, but like inversion for childbirth, I suppose.
Yep. Apparently it helps us getting the head down. So
wait, that's so funny.
Literally like kneel on the side of the couch and just like, I showed it to my mom and she's like, please don't break your neck.
Please post a video of that onto our Instagram page. So yeah, I think we are not exposed as much to like moving backwards in space, moving in different positions. And so if you're a child who's fearful of that movement already, you're not going to do it because it's scary and it doesn't feel good. So how can we get movement and get feedback in a way that doesn't feel intimidating and out of control?
Yeah. Could water help? Floating would be like a really nice, like kind of happy medium. And you're taking like you're being supported by the water, but you're also doing something that can be kind of scary. You see, I'm just thinking more of like a back float.
No,
but we're talking about this example.
No, I love that. That's a really, really good example. And I feel like swimming is so great because you get deep pressure, you get there's almost this like weightlessness feeling, but you still get feedback as to where your body's in space because you are moving against resistance a little bit, right? So for kids who have vestibular differences, whether you are seeking or avoiding, we want to pair it with proprioceptive input. And here's why. Because when you are, say you're a kid on a swing who is just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, at some point, you know, there are kids who just don't integrate that in the way you or I might integrate that with like an autonomic response of dizziness, flush face, like, but they're going to show it in other ways. Maybe they're going to become dysregulated later. Maybe they're going to get the hiccups. Their breathing patterns are going to change. And vestibular input can actually affect you for up to 6 hours up to when you've had it. So I remember I worked with a therapist who said that she used to go salsa dancing and she'd be up all night because of all the spinning she had to do from salsa dancing. But maybe you're just up all night because you're like, wow, I just had so much fun and I'm amped up. Could also be the movement you had. But you want to pair it with that vestibular input. I mean, your vestibular input with your proprioceptive input, because it's going to help you stay grounded. It's going to bring you back into your body, whereas you can almost get this like spatial lack of, I mean, everyone's been like dizzy.
Floating in space.
Yes, you don't feel connected to your body. You feel very disconnected. And so how can we combine those two things to keep you focused, attentive, aware, so that you're not escalating and escalating and escalating. We want to kind of meet that threshold, but not let them surpass it. Is that making sense?
Yeah, no. And can you give some examples of how, like, you can be specific too, of like an example of a specific client, but can you give examples of like how you compare that?
Yes. So, I mean, I'll talk about a sensory gym example. So like say this kid is on a swing and they want to spin and they're saying, spin me, spin me. Maybe instead they sit on a sit and spin. And so now they have to turn themselves. Or a kid who likes to go really, really, really high on a swing. Instead of you pushing them, they have a rope that they have to pull to keep themselves up. Or say that they want to be shook on a swing. They want to go really, really fast. Have them lay on their belly and hold on to the swing instead of they're just sitting there kind of just experiencing the input. They have to hold on and get feedback to their muscles and their joints. So those are examples of like being in a clinic.
It's making it like a passive activity a little bit more active for them.
Yes, exactly. And, there are points, right? There are points where it's okay to experience that passive input, but most often I want the kid to know how to get input themselves. I'm not going to be there all the time. So, I mean, obviously those are specific to certain equipment items. So I think in the home, like say you have your kid that really needs to be rocked to feel calm. Mm-hmm. And so you have maybe you and the parent have opposite ends of a blanket and the child is laying in the middle of the blanket and you're swinging them. Maybe what they first have to do is they have to like crawl up to a side and like high five. Obviously, maybe this child is not 10 years old. But if you have the strength to do this, like maybe they have to like crawl to one side and like high five dad or high five mom or whoever. That's how they initiate each round. So there's some part of this that they're getting feedback to it, or you have to put it down, you roll them up, they have to unroll themselves, and then you can do the next round. Integrating some way that the child is actively participating in this idea. Yeah, like jumping and crashing into a pile of pillows, like stuffing pillows into a fitted sheet, or like obviously being very careful about your environment if you're doing something like this at home, but doing something like that. And then the child has to now crawl out of the pillows, but they get that big vestibular input of the toss or the jump, and then they have to crawl out. And then then they have to crawl through a tunnel. But those kids that just feel like they're never satiated, you have to add in the probe. You have to add in the body feedback. Or maybe they have to crawl under a pillow. Maybe they have to crawl, you make it as hard as you can possibly make it.
Yeah.
Without the kid. Because I've worked with some kids who need intensity, and parents are always like, whoa, about how far, like, I want to see, like, where is their limit? Like, and I'm watching for carefully for signs of like, okay, yeah, they are overstimulated, but it's not presenting in the way that you or I might think.
And I guess what would be some signs to look out for that, okay, like they have hit their threshold, or we turned to like being beneficial to almost like overstimulated.
Yeah, I think along the way, making sure, and there are kids where I'm like, we're not getting on a swing because I know that it's going to be too much for your system. And what a child wants is not what a child often needs. And there's always a level of like, follow their lead. Like if they need intensity, we're going to do it, but we're going to figure it out in a way that doesn't have you surpass that threshold. So you're looking for a way to get that threshold. So you asked me, what signs might a parent look for that they are approaching overstimulation? I look for things like breathing patterns. Are they shallow breathing? Are they tripping and a little more clumsy than they were at the beginning of this session? Is their voice volume really escalating?
Yeah.
Opposite. Are they approaching shutdown and their voice volume is going lower and they're speaking less? Like, what are their patterns of speech looking like? Are they able to engage in reciprocal interaction in a way that they maybe were at the beginning of the session? Obviously, looking for like other autonomic signs, and your autonomic system regulates your nervous system. So thinking about like face flush. Did I say hiccuping already? I can't remember.
Earlier, but not
earlier. Yeah. If your child starts to hiccup, that can be a sign. And then, yeah.
Okay, so then how do you, if you have a kid that's exhibiting these signs, how do you kind of swing them back to being like, okay, now let's kind of calm down and get us back to base level because maybe the session's wrapping up, or you're like, okay, well, now we got to get ready for bedtime. Like that's a totally different energy level that we have to.
Yeah, it's a transition. Definitely. two parts. Part one, we covered this, I think, in the last episode, but co-regulation, right? Like, I'm not saying it's time to calm down. I might point out, like, I'm noticing that your breath sounds like this. And they'll say something like, yeah, and I'll be like, they might mean our body's moving a little fast. Obviously, this is depending on the child. If that's a child who can't tolerate that, I'm changing the environment, but in a playful way. I'm completely shifting the environment to a way. Maybe I'm guiding them towards a cozy corner or a tent-like structure. I am lowering my voice. I'm getting lower to the ground. A lot of time, kids who are needing that almost like intensity of movement, sometimes they can experience that intensity from imaginative play. I'll be like, oh my goodness, something's coming. Run and hide. And so we'll have to run and hide. And now we've guided through an arousal shift. And then should we? And so now we're in this play sequence together of like, there's something that's happening. And we still almost have that I don't want to say like fight or flight need, but sometimes kids love to be in that fight or flight state, but we have it through the play instead of through the movement. So I'll try to use strategies like that. I'll try to create a more linear sequence. So it's not like I'm here, I'm there, I'm here, I'm there. It's like we're in a cave, we're crawling through a tunnel, we're back to the cave. We're in a cave, we're crawling through the tunnel, we're crawling over a crash pad, we're back to the cave. There's a sequence to it. So I'm giving them order and structure. I'll try to use rhythm, marching out at like a rhythmic pace. So rhythm can be really calming to your vestibular system. Music can be really calming to your vestibular system. I mean, I just gave a bunch of pretty random examples, but
yeah, no, those are great ideas. And I think going back to like the example of, okay, we're playing after dinner in our playroom and like we're trying to now transition to bedtime. Headphone fell off. Will we then give a lot of verbal cueing as well to say, okay, like we're in the cave, we're reading a story to the monsters. And now it's like in 5 minutes, it's time for us to crawl up the stairs and go into our bedroom. And like, are you also giving a lot of that feedback? Because that's what I give parents as either using timers or really just using words and communication of like what they can expect next so that they're like, you're not transitioning immediately and it's a little bit more of a
definitely I mean I always agree with giving transition cues, although I definitely have kids that it's like no, like and it's coming and it's like no, so that's when I don't stop the play. It's kind of like
you play through the transition.
I'm like, they're outside and we're like, we need to stomp so loud down the hallway to scare away whatever is coming, or like whatever play sequence we're coming. Yes. So, I mean, I love that. That idea is awesome. And then maybe you sneak up.
Yeah.
Sneak. Kids love to sneak. To be fair, kids love an opportunity to sneak, but in a way that it's like, okay, this is exactly. I mean, I feel like it always comes back to play, co-regulation, reading the child, reading the environment.
Yeah.
I mean, the vestibular system is vast. I will say that again, because there's so much that it affects so many different areas. This is just a drop in the bucket, but hopefully the most relevant to people that are listening. Oh, I'm going to go. Oh, try. Go really easy on you. Okay. A pillow. Yeah. That. You know, it would be fun that I just thought of when you said that is like, what if you made a giant crash pad out of fitted sheets and then you did yoga on top of the crash pad? So now you're getting all these different head positions. You're getting input to the system.
That's hard.
But that could be really fun. It's like you fall down. Maybe you're pretending to be an animal and it's like, oh, the giraffe's crashing down. And then you get that feedback too. That could be a really fun game. I haven't done that. That's why I give you one and then I take it back. No, I love your idea. That means you, Mike, Casey. Share it with a friend. No problem. So fun. Gabbing.